So welcome everybody to the MPA Multisector Career Perspective panel of amazing alumni. The first order of business is to hear from each alum a little bit about them. So alums, what I'd love for you to do is give us your name when I call you, your name, where you're working, a little bit about what you do, and if you could throw in there when you graduated and what degree you graduated with, that would be helpful as well. So Denna, why don't we start with you?
All right, good evening, everybody. I am Denna Lambert. I actually graduated in 2010, so I started the degree in, I believe, 2007, right when the market just fell and it was sequestration. It was a really exciting time to be in an MPA degree program. I also was working at NASA Goddard while doing the program as well. So I was commuting back and forth. So now I still work for NASA, but I work at NASA headquarters with our Space Technology Mission Directorate. And essentially what we do and what I do is look at the technical gaps or technology gaps that we have for us to be able to go live, land, and explore on distant surfaces, whether it's the moon or to Mars and beyond. We need to solve for some technical gaps. And the way that we do that is by making investments via grants and contracts with academia and private industry. So we have, my particular group has a budget of about $500 million, and we divvy that up through 700 projects that we fund. And we try to mature the technology for a higher TRL level. We're essentially the front door of NASA's research pipeline. So yeah, that's me. If I look like I'm talking to someone else, it's my 5-year-old in the background. So
terrific. Thank you so much. Next on my screen is Diego.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Diego Scharifker. I graduated from the MPA Nonprofit Management concentration in 2021. And I'm currently the head of global business engagement at the Tony Blair Institute. I'll give a bit of my background. I'm originally from Caracas, Venezuela, where I was born and raised. Moved here to the US about 6 years ago because my background is in politics. I was a city council member, an elected official in Caracas. And being part of the opposition to a dictatorship is never an easy task. So eventually just became too dangerous for my wife and I to be there. And we ended up moving here to the US, where I was lucky enough to find a job right after I started my MPA at the USO, the nonprofit that works with the military, where I started doing corporate partnerships with them. And even though I did some fundraising when I ran for office, it was mostly individual giving. It was really at the USO where I started doing corporate fundraising, and it was an amazing experience. And I have to say, it was also very cool to compare what I was learning in class with my nonprofit management program to what I was doing in real life, let's say in the office setting, engaging with some of the largest companies here in the US. So after spending a couple years at the USO, I transitioned over to be the director of corporate partnerships at the Atlantic Council, a think tank here in Washington focused on international policy and international relations from the US with partners and allies. And then just a couple months ago, started as the head of business engagement here at the Tony Blair Institute. I personally really enjoy fundraising. I really enjoy corporate fundraising. It's a really cool and interesting way of leveraging corporate profits to change the world and really empower the organizations I work in to be able to have the funds to do the amazing work they do around the world. So if any of you are thinking about fundraising or thinking about getting into the world of nonprofits, more than happy to dive into more details and answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Terrific. Juan, I've got you next in my circle here.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Juan Rodriguez, and I apologize. I'm having like minor connectivity issues, so if I cut in and out, that's probably why. But like I mentioned, my name is Juan Rodriguez. I was in the Master's in Public Administration program at GW. I graduated in 2015. From there, I had a little bit of a unique path. I actually went the state and local government route. That was what my concentration was when I was in the MPA program, and I actually joined the International City and County Management Association local government fellowship program. And basically the way that program works, that it places you with partner cities throughout the country. And I was actually placed in Fort Lauderdale, so my home state of Florida, where I was born and raised. And I've been there ever since. I've been there with the city for about 9 years now. I started as a fellow, like I mentioned, and rotated throughout a lot of the operating departments throughout the city. So I got to get really unique experiences, from sanitation to mass transportation to urban planning to public finance. So I eventually ended up in data analytics, and I was a senior performance manager there for our transportation and mobility department. So really unique data on transit and how we were moving people at that time. And then I made a switch about 8 years after that to our development services department, where I am now. And I'm the administration division manager for that department. I oversee all of our internal functions. So from performance analytics, as I was mentioning before, to finance, budgeting, accounting, to human resources, to our IT division as well. So all those internal services functions fall beneath me. But I truly will say that I learned that state and local government was my path while I was at GW. And actually GW, even though being in the mecca of federal government, it really opened my eyes that there was more that I going into federal government. So there's a lot of incredible resources there that I took advantage of, and a lot of connections that I made there that put me in the path that I am now. So I'm really lucky to be here and share some of that insight with you all. And again, thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Juan. And you didn't really cut out at all, maybe for a tiny second. Excellent. Okay, so everybody's order switched, but I believe Erin was next. And that's what happens when you shift your screen a little bit. Erin, go ahead.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm Erin Gabriel, and I currently live in Denver, Colorado. I am working with Booz Allen Hamilton, which is a large federal consulting company, mostly in the defense sector, but I work currently deliver on projects in our civil sector. I'm currently working on a project with the IRS. However, in the 3 years or so I've been with Booz Allen, I've delivered on defense projects with the Department of the Army, Interior, Justice, IRS, and I, on any given day, touch EPA, FAA, DOT, all the civil agencies across the board. I get to work in some capacity. So not only delivering to our clients, where I serve mostly as a project manager for IT projects, I also do business development for our climate and infrastructure space. So that includes proposal work, competitive intelligence, as well as some strategic planning and government relations. So across the board, it's a pretty dynamic role. But I graduated from the program with an MPA and a focus in public policy in 2006. At the time I did the part-time program. I started my career at the Office of Management and Budget straight out of college. So I went and got my master's degree while I was working at OMB. My first job there was as a legislative analyst, covering all kinds of different agencies in the civil sector. After 5 years serving in a legislative role, I transitioned over to our National Security Division, where I led the defense intelligence portfolio. It was a $20 billion plus portfolio, working with the Defense Intelligence Agency, all the service intel components, CIA, NGA, NSA, all the 3 letters. I then moved over and left OMB and served under the CFO at the Defense Intelligence Agency for another 5 years. So I spent about 15 years in federal service and spent most of my career over in the DoD side. In 2014, I decided to leave DC, give up my cushy federal job, and move around with my husband. So I had to find some new skills. But the great thing about a public policy degree and a public administration degree is that there's so many different things you can do. So I actually transitioned into specifically IT project management after coming from a budget and finance background. And I worked in state and local government. So my first job out of DC was with the state of North Carolina's IT office, their CIO's office. and I was a project manager there for a while. I then moved into private industry, doing IT project management, and the pandemic came and life got crazy and the world came together and I ended up at Booz Allen. So they started hiring remote employees. The federal government was open to remote consultants, allowing people to deliver from just about anywhere. And I think right now I'm at a piece where all of my experiences have come together in consulting. So on any given day, I'm using project management. I got a budgeting question from one of my execs today. I've supported drafting legislation, as well as just delivering on IT project management and, moving IT systems to the cloud across government. So that's really kind of what my projects have been specializing in, as well as AI and ML. I got to work on a really fun project for the Army. So that's me, and would love to share any other experiences with y'all, because this is a great degree and can offer a lot of different paths.
Wow. Terrific. Thank you. I get so excited listening to alums talk about what they do, and especially because I'm often, and I know Denise does as well, telling students there's just so many different ways you can use the degree that when you ask, like, what's a typical path, that's an impossible question to answer. So, Cori, you are up. You and friends, potentially.
I apologize for the distracting little person. She was very young during COVID, and so she loves a good Zoom. They grew up, in front of a video screen, and yeah. So I actually graduated with my MPA back in 2000. I've had a lot of shifts in my career since that time. You may stay or you may go. So I started almost out of college. I worked on the Hill for a year as a legislative, I don't even know what the title was. It was for a senator. And so I started there and recognized that I was ready to go back, wanted to do grad school before I did my career. And from there, I went into a association role in DC and doing government relations, and absolutely loved it. But after a couple of years, I was ready to come back to Florida, where I live. I'm in the capital in Tallahassee. And one moment.
I'm laughing because, yes, my son, he's turning 5. And yes, my son loves a good Zoom meeting.
Go watch TV. I'm asking you to watch TV. So I came back to Florida, where I was very lucky to get a job with an elected official a state legislator. And so I worked in the Florida House from the Tampa Bay area for 2 different elected officials. The first one retired, then I worked for the next one for quite a while doing legislative aid work at the state level in our local community, and then moved on to a state regulatory agency, our water management district, where I did government relations, which was super cool because the water, even though it's a regulatory agency in Florida, they have a lot of power and they're really big. And so I worked with all the municipalities, all the counties, and it was an exciting time, which sounds odd for water management district, but it happened to be a really unique time in the Tampa Bay region related to water. And then from there, we wanted to move to Tallahassee. We just wanted to make a change. And I ended up shifting career paths and going into economic development. So I worked for Enterprise Florida. It's the arm of the state of Florida that recruits businesses. So I did business development, and my client was the state of Florida, bringing companies here. And so it was really cool because it took all the government relations tools. It took all my knowledge that I learned at the water management district about infrastructure in the state and my legislative government relations components, and it just transitioned to a different audience. And so that you can take what you're learning now and just transitioned it to a different audience. And so I loved that. And then after the BP oil spill, Deepwater Horizon oil spill is its official title. But after that, the state of Florida won a settlement against BP. All the southern states did. And the state of Florida did something unique. The legislature set aside 75% of the economic damages that the state received, separate there's lots of settlements related to the oil spill, but the states got economic damages. And the state of Florida was awarded $2 billion, and they set aside 1.5 billion of that in a grant fund specifically for economic development and workforce development for the 8 most impacted counties in the Panhandle. We call it Northwest Florida, but it's that Panhandle of Florida on the Gulf Coast. And so I administer that grant program. And so I work with all the local governments, again, the government relations components that you're learning now. I'm still using all of those, but from a whole different perspective. So that's my story.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. You know, I'm enjoying this very much, and I'm reminded of something that actually Denise's predecessor at Trachtenberg, Paul Binkley, told me when I first started at GW. I asked him about work-life balance, and he said, it's all life. And that's what this is. It's all life. And so it's lovely to see extra people in the screen, and my dog is just kind of hanging out listening to all of this. So
the work-life blend. There's no balance, it's a blend.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. So we have some time now for questions from our students. I have some that I can ask, but students, this is, well, partly your class time and also your time to ask our panelists any questions. You can unmute yourself. I am also keeping a very close eye on the chat, which sometimes people prefer to speaking. So whatever is comfortable for you works for me as well. I don't see any questions in the chat yet. If there's anybody who'd like to jump in. Okay. I'm going to go first then, so that I'll kick things off, and then we will. So like I said, if you're uncomfortable unmuting, stick your question in the chat. I'm going to ask a question that, well, let me see. Terrific. Excellent. I don't have to kick it off. Are you happy with your present job? Are you enjoying what it is that you're doing? That, and maybe why? That would be a great question. So this is just open to the whole panel.
I'll take it while my little person is away. So I think someone had mentioned that, you know, government, you know, it's very vast, and each agency has its own personality. It also has its own structure of things, whether it's policies, regulatory, or whatever, that govern what it can and cannot do. In NASA, we have a lot of great public perception, but sometimes not a lot of budget. So when I hear a couple of $1 billion from the DoD side or the intelligence agency side, sometimes we're dealing in the millions of dollars because we're much smaller. What I would say is that in the 20 years that I've been at NASA, it kind of ebbs and it flows. And that's where you do see like the transition of, first I started out as a contract specialist with the government, looking at our technical requirements and how do we translate that into a statement of work that we then can go out to the street and work with industry. Then I transitioned over to, you know, doing our affirmative action and civil rights stuff. And that was great, but it got emotionally exhausting because sometimes you're kind of hitting a wall there. And I took on a detail opportunity and a leadership opportunity to try out budgeting. And budgeting is its own field of expertise that you could spend your whole career there. But I would say that you kind of learn a skill, especially in the program, that gives you enough general information that you can navigate in those different kind of phases of your career. So now in dealing with space technology, I do get to marry the side of really understanding from our technical community where they need help in solving problems. Where is the technology just not quite ready for flight ops or demonstration? And where we might need to, you know, make a calculated risk of, can we hand this off to someone else to mature? And really using that budget experience to say, okay, how do we use the Competes Act as a flexible tool to where we can bring in solutions from not only industry and academia, but also the general public. So that's where over time, over the 20 years I've been, I would say it's starting to get a bit more exciting. And yes, people kind of hop to different roles every 2 to 3 to 4 years, kind of to keep your skills fresh. but I've learned like it naturally evolves over time. And especially if you have the skills from the MPA program that help you translate those into other areas. So it is a blend of a life balance, especially with having a 5-year-old with scissors right now. But I think definitely with technology, it has helped, especially with being able to dial in remotely to some meetings, be able to show up at a bus stop or do a class project and have that flexibility. Some organizations don't have that as much flexibility, so it would be harder to be a professional executive single mom. But yeah, it's good right now.
Other answers? Anyone else want to jump in on that?
Sure.
Well,
I love what I do. It took a while to, I wouldn't say it took a while. The cool thing about, again, this industry is there's so many different things you can do that if you don't like the job, you don't have to stay. And I don't think there's a lot of, people don't look at your resume and say, oh, you job hopped, because that's more normal in this industry. So you can always try something new, which is what I really like too. I did a stint at our Chamber of Commerce overseeing government relations and military and veterans affairs. And I discovered that having like 50 board members who were your bosses wasn't for me, but I wouldn't have known it if I didn't try, right? Like I loved the subject matter and the topic and the programming and who I was helping, in that role, but didn't enjoy this giant board of 50. So that's the neat thing too, is that you can find what you like. You can be a generalist or you can be a specialist. I've done both in my career. I'd highly recommend the generalist at the beginning, so you get to pick and choose a little bit. But then now I love that I have a specialization, and it's something I'm kind of known for within my bubble of economic development in Florida.
And Cori, just to piggyback off that, I think that's really interesting because I think I started as a generalist through my fellowship in the city, and I think I still am a generalist. And I think that's what makes it really exciting, that I have so many different spheres and service areas underneath me that I can kind of dip my toe into each one of those projects and what it means at a local government level. And actually, Erin, it was really interesting having you talk about working for the Office of Management and Budget, because actually when I was at GW, I was a contractor for the Office of Management and Budget through their budget systems branch. So I got a taste of government at the federal level, and I really wanted something that would drive me on a personal level as well, and blending work-life balance into just a blend of life. And that's why I went into the local government sphere, because I saw the different programs and initiatives and policies that we did at the local level, how it affected those around me directly, and how we reacted to certain things. For example, in the city of Fort Lauderdale, we had what was called like a 1,000-year flood, where our city hall actually was flooded, and now we're dispersed throughout the city in different rental offices and working from home. So responding in that emergency situation, and a lot of the hurricanes and natural disasters that plague the state of Florida, especially South Florida as well, was really interesting. So I think in keeping myself as a generalist and finding different aspects of local government that really excited me to this day keeps me so interested in the field. And I think every day is a new day and a new fire and a new challenge. So I absolutely love my job at the local government level.
I am going to jump in. I'm going to jump in, Diego. The next question's for you, actually, because now we are getting quite a few questions in here, and I want to make sure we have time to answer all of them. So, Diego, in your experience, what's the difference in working in a political elected position as compared to your various administrative and private organizational positions? This is a unique background that we don't see that often.
Yeah, and to be honest, I can connect it back to the first question, which is,
great.
Let's say if it were for me, I would still be in Venezuela, still doing politics. I wanted to be the mayor of my city and then governor. Who knew what was going to happen afterwards? But life throws you curveballs, and you just need to adapt. And we had to leave, and we ended up here in the U.S. And we've been very happy, and we've been very lucky. And I've really enjoyed my career in nonprofit fundraising, because in the end, at least for my career choice, I don't see myself working in the private sector. I don't see myself working to make other people rich and generate profits for them. I want to work in the field where I feel I'm having an impact on society. I need the companies to continue being successful because I do corporate fundraising, but I just don't want to necessarily work in the companies. So that's why, and just to piggyback on what's been said before, what I really love about our career path, or just MPP, the MPP or MPA program, is that you can really adapt the skills to so many different careers and types of jobs, that you can run for office, you can work in the public sector, you can work in the private sector, you can find connections between both. Very funny what Cori said. One of the main differences is in political office, you have thousands of bosses and everyone keeps you accountable and asks you questions and wants answers from you. At my current job, I only have one boss, which is awesome. I just have to report into one. But also, I don't have the same amount of freedom of being an elected official and then defining policy and really driving, let's say, local politics, which, of course, here I'm just one more piece in a huge machine. I do want to just to wrap up and to answer one of the questions as well about was it worth it, the MPA program? I think it's what is worth it is not the piece of paper you get and you stick on the wall. It's really the skills and how you leveraged your time during the program to really learn what's best for your career. And for me, it was life-changing to work and study at the same time, because I could actually compare the theory I was learning in class with what was really happening in my job on a day-to-day basis. I noticed that some of the theory is not really how things work, and others it really does. So being able to combine that theory and that practice was really what I feel was really worthwhile. And then the truth is, as you grow in your career, certain jobs are going to ask for a master's degree. And that's where the piece of paper does help, because at least you can tick that box of being able to fulfill that qualification. But again, it's really how you leverage your time there. And quickly, one of the classes I liked the most, I don't remember the formal name of it, but it was a class about how to manage teams and how to be a good manager. That was really life-changing for me. Like most of my work now, managing a team now larger than at my previous job, and really have to manage personalities and impact and bringing in results. Like as you grow in your career, you need to know how to manage people so that the people can do their work, and then you're helping build a structure for them to be able to be successful. That for me was one of the biggest skills I learned during my time at the MPA program.
Terrific. Thank you. And we're going to come back to this topic because Diego got ahead of us and there's some questions down below that I think fit perfectly with your answer there. So I appreciate you taking a look at the chat. Erin, there's a question for you, and it gets also the theme of is it worth it? And what's the most valuable is coming up in these questions over and over again. So obviously that's something that our students would like addressed, and you've already begun to do that. So Erin, as somebody who's also interested in the transition from public to private at some point, from a financial point of view, was it worth it? And what skill set or courses do you think were worth the investment?
It's a really great question. I may not be the best person to ask. I left government as a GS-15 SME in a very, very cushy job. I'm not going to lie, 15 years, 6 weeks of vacation, great pay. And I walked away, top secret security clearance, and I walked away from it all. So for me, that was not the best financial decision, but that's not where my life was at the time. And that wasn't my goal. So I started over as an IT project manager and have been rebuilding those skills. And in my current job, I've brought that all back together. So I will say there's pros and cons to switching sectors. I don't recommend being what one of my career coaches called a double switcher. So you're switching what it is you do, your skill set and your specialties, as well as your industry. So I went from being a budget and an expert in intelligence budgeting and strategy, working directly for the CFO and working across the OD&I and on all these Tiger teams, and had a great relationship with people across the community. So I took that specialty expertise, walked away from it, and went somewhere else, and ended up in state and local government. So I switched sectors and job roles. Very difficult. Do not recommend, but it can be done. I would say one at a time is much better. But the degree that we have really provides you an amazing set of skills that can allow you to move. I've moved federal sector, state, private industry, now back to federal consulting. And I would say that the degree and all the things that you learn along with that really help you along the way, because in any job, you're going to have to manage people and manage teams. You're going to have some sort of budgeting. You're going to have to do some sort of analysis of policy or regulations. doesn't matter what industry you're in, whether it's Cori being over in water or you know, federal corporate financing rules. Like there's policy and regulations everywhere in any industry that you're in. So I think, you know, the degree and your path that you choose really provide the foundation for anything that you can do moving forward. And I can say the classes that I learned, you know, several others have mentioned they worked while they were doing the program, and you get to mesh the daily activities of your job with what you're learning. And there's a few core things that you always come back to. And I think in any job, it's managing teams, it's managing people, budget, HR, finance, any job, you're going to touch some of those.
I wanted to kind of piggyback back off of what Erin said.
Mhm.
I think if I could go back, because I think Erin, you were doing this part-time, as I was doing this part-time, you know, from, you know, NASA and then commuting in. One thing I wish I could have done was to be a part of the scene, meaning attending, hearing speakers, kind of, you know, rubbing elbows with other, you know, colleagues that were in the DC area. I was doing the commuting things. I wanted to get back home before the last train at night. So that's something I wish I could have done, because what happens is when your day is full of 4 and 5 and 6 meetings and you're managing these big projects, you kind of get stuck in your own organizational bubble. And I think with the MPA program, especially with GW and its reach, you do get that exposure to lots of cross sectors from different, you know, whether it's industry or state or local government. That's something that was really, you know, I think I had to work even harder to gain access to after I left the program. So I think the value comes in different stages. From the paper definitely gets you access, but the relationships come from being in front of and face to face and having conversations with folks, either your classmates or the speakers that come, and also attending, you know, various meetings that come up.
Just to make a plug with that as well, if I don't know if it's still called this, but I was the social chair for the Trachtenberg student organization while I was there, and I definitely took advantage of all those extracurricular events and put on some of them. And that was probably the biggest takeaway from my program, where I made most of my, not just connections, and I'm not just talking at a professional level, but at a personal level as well. Those are going to be some of the people within your program that you're going to know for the rest of your life, and who may be the ones either hiring you or connecting you to some of those jobs. So in addition to the incredible coursework that there is at Trachtenberg, I also highly encourage you to get involved outside of the classroom as well, as much as you can.
The speaker series were amazing. I know there's unique history that occurs for all of us when we're in grad school, but I was there for 9/11. And so after 9/11, yeah, well, I graduated right. And so, but because of that, the speaker series and what my concentration had been was the new emergency management. Anyhow, because of the speaker series, it was phenomenal what we were being exposed to and being shared with. But I took that back to the job I had, and I was able to move up in my role at the association, because they needed somebody who knew these things. They needed somebody to send to Department of Interior to see if what the feds were saying or what the agency wanted to do was really appropriate for the industry. And I was like, I just heard these speakers last night, and that doesn't jive with reality, you know, what's really happening on the ground. And so I was able to have these conversations at Department of Interior about the oil industry. Here I was just out of grad school, you know, having these big, massive conversations because I'd been to going to these speaker series. And so I had the knowledge. And so that helped me promote myself within my organization, the association. And so there's a lot of intangible things you can take away besides just what you're getting in the classroom. And I do wish I had maintained relationships better. Now I'm fantastic at relationship building and, you know, using my network for good. Network in a positive association with the word networking. But I wish I had spent more time doing that when I was in grad school and understood more the value of the relationships I was building and the people in my classes.
Cori, you mentioned concentration there briefly, and one of the questions in the chat is how your concentrations informed your career paths. So if anyone else has any thoughts about how the concentration played out or didn't play out in their career, that might be something interesting as well.
I liked intergovernmental relations, and so to me, that new emergency management track at the time was it was pre 9/11. It was intergovernmental relations, the closest I could get to something that was in the program. I think you have a lot more really interesting and a lot more opportunities for concentrations now at this point in my career. I don't know that it matters all these years later, but it definitely made a difference for me at the beginning of my career.
For me, I did the program evaluation concentration. What I would say to that, with being on the federal sector and having to write up requirements that, you know, where we want to contract with, let's say, Booz Allen or Bryce or ASRC, it gives me the ability to know the type of help I need, how to ask the questions, how to discern, hey, are we going to get what we need for the right price? And you know, a lot of times I may not be the expert in the room, but it does give me the ability to ask the questions, which came from the evaluation concentration.
Yeah, I'll say that as well. I although my concentration really helped in defining my career paths, like I mentioned, I was concentrating in state and local government. I would say specific courses, whether it's in your concentration or not, obviously you have to take certain amount of those courses for your concentration. Specific courses are what comes to my mind that kind of helped me to this day. So for example, program evaluation, I took that with Kathy Newcomer, and that completely changed my outlook, and I apply those skills to this day. So I definitely will. My piece of advice is for you to take a look at which professors and which courses are being offered. And if you can take a few courses, even if they're not in your concentration per se, but something that would be tactful and interesting for you to use in your future career, I would definitely recommend you taking them.
Sorry, you think I know to unmute by now. I think we've got one more question, and I believe Dana, Erin answered your question about getting a detail and how challenging that can be. And that might be something you want to talk about in the breakout rooms as well. All right, looks like our last question here is about when we talked about work-life balance. How about school, everything else balance? If anybody has some words of wisdom, we'll give that a little bit of time, and then I'm going to go ahead and do the breakout rooms. I want to make sure we have a chance to do that as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in there quickly just to say, I've sort of put it in the chat already. I was working full time and studying part time, and it was hard. And I was also married, so I had my, let's say, home responsibilities with my wife, and that was, let's say, it was a lot of stuff. I used to stress out a lot about going to networking events, thinking that that was going to be fundamental for the future of my career. And yes, networking is important. It's important to be out there and meet new people. But the network is built with time. It's not because you went out to an event once and that's where you networked and you were successful there. So if you're working, I spent more time working than doing GW life. It worked for my career. I wish I would have enjoyed, to Dana's point, more of the events happening and going to see presidents speaking at GW or like really interesting people. It would have been interesting. I'm not sure that would have helped my career. So I'm happy I spent more time working than going to GW stuff. But if you can try to find the balance and leverage the amazing opportunities of things that happen at GW, do it to your best, but don't stress out. Like in the end, 10 years from now, you're not going to really remember if you missed a networking event or whatever. You will think about, were you putting in the extra work to be able to get a promotion or grow in your career, or maybe switch jobs to something that you're more interested in than what you're doing right now.
Yeah, I was going to jump in on this one as well. I agree with what Diego said. I think it also may depend on where you're at in your own career, because we all come from different perspectives, right? You may be a couple years out of college, you may be in a job you don't like, you may be 10 years into your career and you can't leave your job. I was in a job I loved, absolutely loved, and I couldn't have walked away. I would have been silly to walk away from that job at that time. now would I do it? No, but I'm also at a very different stage and financial position in life. So I could do that, but I think it really just works. You have to figure out what works best for you and your career. If you're in a job that you don't like and you don't, and you can go full-time, maybe going to school full-time and working an internship or doing all these networking things will help you get to where it is that you want to go. Versus if you're in a really great job or a job you love and you want to stay there, maybe that's not the best option for you. So I think it really just depends on your personal situation, but the promotions and the accolades will always be there, and there will be an opportunity for you. My husband did this program as well, and he went and got an MBA later. So he did 2 full-time degrees, and he got a very, very different grad school experience. He has a lot of friends from grad school. I don't, but the folks that I am close with are the people that I spent a lot of time doing projects with and who also worked full-time. So you kind of find your niche there. So I don't think you can go wrong either way.
All right. So I think that's a great note to end on, and we have just a little bit of time for breakout rooms. But before we move to those, hopefully, since I've not done that particular thing on Zoom yet, and if it for some reason doesn't work, apologies. But before we get to that point, I cannot thank this wonderful panel enough for joining us, for giving us your wisdom, for being pretty open and honest with us. And I know the students are grateful. I'm grateful. Denise is grateful. So thank you so, so much. So we are going to stop recording now. And